Hi, I am Dr. Julie Brown, trained concussion doctor and board certified chiropractic neurologist. Today, I want to continue talking about the cerebellum and how it relates to psychiatric disorders. Just to refresh, the cerebellum sits in the back of the brain here. It has more neurons than the rest of the cortex of the brain. And when you are born, it's basically smooth. And as you develop what's called folia, which means that all this gray matter and connectivity are developing in that cerebellum. So there are three ways in which information goes in and out of that cerebellum. You get information from the spinal cord through that inferior part in the vestibular system. You also get information from the cortex and the brainstem, but you have three pedicles. You have the inferior, middle, and superior. Things are always going out of all three of them, but the only one that receives information is through the middle and the inferior pedicles. They go into the cerebellum, and there's four different nuclei on each side of the brain that the ultimate goal of the cerebellum is to inhibit, and it talks out to different parts of the nervous system. Had a cough. So it talks to different parts of the nervous system. And the main things I'll talk about when it comes to psychiatry are ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, schizophrenia, bipolar, and manic depressive disorder. In the cases of all of those, a lot of them comment on the volume of the cerebellum, or what's called the vermis, which is the midline part of the cerebellum. As a chiropractic neurologist, we do therapy and try to get specific as to what parts of the cerebellum we are targeting, though many of them overlap. And we do different exercises. We do really well, I would say, more with autism and ADHD, though that is not my primary focus at all. I'm more of a concussion-based chiropractic neurologist. And most of the time, that cerebellum is inhibiting. Now, somebody can have a concussion and develop some of these issues. They may get depression. They may get more hyperactive, bipolar, manic. These things can express after a concussion, and you have to wonder how much of that cerebellum is involved with that. The other thing is anxiety. That's a common one I get, especially after a car accident. People are a little more anxious to drive. So it's more, that type of anxiety is more of a not organic. It's for a reason, where organic is you're anxious and you don't know why. And I see two different forms of anxiety. I have people who have anxiety that it's their thoughts and they're, thinking a lot. And the other, they get physical reactions, heartbeat, sweating, more of an autonomic thing that you can see and observe. So when I have patients who talk about anxiety, I'm always wanting to just identify what type they have. And with that one, it tends to show there's too much activity in the cerebellum. So those other ones, ADHD, autism, schizophrenia, bipolar, manic depressive disorder, there was more of a depressed or the cerebellum that wasn't working as well, whereas the anxiety one it's working too fast. Now, the other thing to take into consideration, this is where my worlds collide. I love neurology and I love nutrition and just kind of chemistry because they go together. Your brain controls everything, but it has to be fed the appropriate things to control everything. So the cerebellum has more insulin receptors than the rest of the cerebrum. And it might make sense if there's more neurons in that cerebellum. But when we talk about things like insulin resistance, or the theory of insulin resistance, where you have blood sugar running around your body could use, you have ketones running around your body could use, and you also have high insulin. Actually, you don't have to have the ketones. You can just have the high insulin and the high glucose. You can develop a resistance because hormones, too many, your body eventually is like, hey, we're done talking to you. And you can develop that at the level of the cerebellum. I know with my patients, they haven't been clinically diagnosed with many of these diagnosis codes, but they also haven't gone to a doctor to be diagnosed with that. But they will notice they'll have a lot of the same complaints, ability to focus, getting along with others, excited one day, sad that they can have these symptoms and not technically have that diagnosis. And I notice when I help their blood sugar by what they eat, that makes a big difference for them. On top of that, if I can look at their nervous system, if they're coming to me for nutrition, I don't always look at the nervous system as in depth as if I did with someone who just wanted neurology or therapy for neurology. But when I get both of those, it seems to be the magic to help them stabilize their life. Many of my teenage patients, in particular females, they are the worst. Their blood sugar is all over the place. Therefore, their moods, how they get along with their parents, their friends, I mean, they are all over the place. And all I harp on is eat some meat. Let's get you stabilized. Um, the other thing to take into consideration, I've had cases where people have come to me saying they have ADHD or they think they do, which is the three hallmarks are like impulsiveness. I can't think of them offhand. They all seem the same to me: impulsiveness, restlessness, and inability to focus. And that participates with the vermis, the midline of that cerebellum. And I'll find on my sacidometry test where I test these eye movements, they have a difficult time gaze holding. So they'll look quick and stare at the target. That's what should happen. But when they have true ADHD, I'll find that they anticipate that the dot is moving and it's not. So to me, that would be more accurate. What I find with ADHD many of the times are people just have too many things on their plate. They can't say no to things. They're, want to do everything. And that's great to be curious and want to do things. But for those patients, I'm like, you have to say no to something, or you have to get somebody else to help with this project, whatever it may be. That's more of the ADHD that I see. And when it comes to kids, I'm going to say we are feeding them sugar. We're loading up with sugar to go to school. And then we tell them to sit still under LED lights that are no good for our mitochondria for energy. And they're just trying to keep their brain going. So you start to get more movement where kids really should be out moving. Anyway, don't forget the cerebellum. It plays a critical role in a lot of these psychiatric issues, as well as your insulin and keeping your blood sugar appropriate so that your insulin's not spiking all day long. And I don't mean by having your insulin high all day long so your insulin's high all day long. I mean, we got to keep those carbs a little lower and make sure we're getting healthy fats. When I say that, I mean animal fats and protein to help keep building. If you have comments or questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.